Welcome to Women's Stories, the short film showcase. I'm Dora Williams, and I'm honored to host this Q&A session. Tonight, we will be speaking with 5 filmmakers and taking your questions as well. So please share them in the comment section of OV. I'd like to welcome John Kolake, from South Burlington, Vermont. He's a collaborator on the Elegies film, which is his 16th film that was done in collaboration with Ako Onake, I'm gonna get that right, John, and Brian Stevenson. He currently serves in the Vermont House of Representatives and is an adjunct professor at Champlain College. His videos have been screened in festivals, museums, hospitals, and universities worldwide, and televised locally in Minneapolis, Houston, Burlington, and regionally on the Vermont PBS and Twin Cities PBS, nationally on Free Speech TV and PBS, internationally on Culture 24, and his films are in the collections of numerous libraries and universities. Gail Reimer is from Brookline, Massachusetts, and is the director of In the Footsteps of Regina's Hoeness. Raymer founded the Jewish Women's Archive, also known as JWA, in 1995 to document and make known the stories and struggles and achievements of Jewish women, both celebrated and unheralded. Reimer led the organization for its first 2 decades, pioneering the use of digital tools in the creation of an archive for the 21st century. And recognizing the storytelling power of old as well as new technologies, Reimer served as executive producer of Making Trouble in 2007, and that was the archive's award-winning documentary film on Jewish women comedians. She directed the documentary short In the Footsteps of Regina Hoeness in 2014, just before she retired as JWA's executive director. Brian Bolster from Los Angeles, California, is the creator of Winter's Watch. Brian Bolster is from suburban Boston and is a graduate of NYU's film program. His short documentary films have screened at over 80 international film festivals, including Sundance, Full Frame, Outfest, Slam Dance, and AFI Docs. His films were distributed by The New Yorker, The Atlantic Video, Aeon Video, and United Airlines, among other channels. His most recent film, Departing Gesture, won the Grand Jury Award for the Best Short Documentary at the 2019 Florida Film Festival and the Audience Award for the RAPT's 2019 Online Film Festival. Other awards include the 2017 New Hampshire Film Festival Film of the Year for his short film Winter's Watch, and Best Director at the 2016 Tacoma Film Festival for his documentary The Tricks List. Brian is a 4-time alumnus of Big Sky Documentary Film Festival, and his short documentary, The Lookout, won the festival's Big Sky Award in 2012. And in 2014, his short documentary, 1 Year Lease, won the award for Best Documentary Short at the Tribeca Film Festival and was a Cinema Eye Honors 2015 nominee for Outstanding Achievement in Nonfiction Short Filmmaking and was also a finalist for the RAP's Online Shortlist Film Festival in 2015. Also with us is Sarah Pajaro from Boston, Massachusetts, and she's the creator of Meet the Artist, Melissa Glick. She's an Italian filmmaker based in Boston, and after graduating from Berklee College of Music in 2012, she's been working as a producer, director, editor, featuring award-winning artists. Her short film, The Dream, won the Audience Award at the 2016 Online New England Film Festival. Meet the Artist, Melissa Glick, was selected at the 2019 Boston Short and Online New England Film Festival. Her public media art installation, Infinity, was commissioned on the largest urban screen in New England. She's also the owner and founder of Circle Moon Productions. And we have Chloe White from London, the UK. She's the director of The Long Haul. She's a UK-based documentary filmmaker and director of the production company Whalebone Films. Her films are intimate, considered portraits focusing mainly on the female experience. And Chloe, the first question will go to you. Could you please share with us, how did you discover your subject? Did you meet them and then decide to make the film, or did you have an idea and then went looking for the subject?
I was at an artist residency called MacDowell Colony in New Hampshire, and I've got a lot of family from Maine, and my mum used to go to Maine every summer as a child, and so it's sort of become a bit of a mythical place in my household. My mum still subscribes to Down East magazine, the Maine magazine, so I knew that after my residency, I wanted to go to Maine and I wanted to make a film there. It's kind of how I travel. I sort of look for subjects and or there's a place I want to go and I look for subjects there. And Maine is very close to New Hampshire. So while I was doing the residency, I sort of started researching stories in Maine, and just kind of fell across a news article about the increasing number of female lobster fisherwomen. Um, and so I found a Facebook group called Chicks Who Fish and put something on there and had a really good response. And then I spoke to a few different women who fish for lobster in Maine and fell across Colleen, who is the woman in my film. And we had a really good chat and we got along. And she had a beautiful way of talking and expressing herself, which was really important. And so then straight after the residency, I went over and met her and spent 2 days on her fishing boat. And that was it, really. It was such a beautiful, easy experience compared to, I feel like, the sort of quite difficult journeys I put myself on now with films. Somehow it's got way more complicated. But, this was quite early on in my career. And as it often happens, it was sort of the most uncomplicated moment of my career. But this film's actually lived a lot longer than some of the films I've made that have been way more complicated.
Well, thank you, Chloe. Sarah and Brian, your films featured individual women as well. So please share how you discovered your subjects. And we'll start with Sarah and then we'll go to Brian.
I had the opportunity to meet Melissa at the Artisans Asylum, which is a makerspace in Somerville. And I met her through a mutual friend, and I started talking to her, and I was fascinated by her artwork and the fact that she was using recycling material to make art. And I asked her if she would be available to be part of a short film.
Brian? Brian,
Sorry
you need to unmute.
Yeah. I came across my subject. First, I wasn't originally going to. I didn't know about Star Island and Alexandra at all. I originally wanted to do a documentary about a winter caretaker at a hotel that closes in Glacier National Park in the winter. But there was a lot of red tape dealing with the National Park Service. So for a variety of reasons, that did not work out after probably a year back and forth. I had this idea for a documentary about a winter caretaker for many years. So I didn't know what to do. So I just did a quick Google search and found her. And I reached out to the Star Island Corporation and they put me in touch with her. And within 15 minutes, she got back to me and said yes. And I liked it because I liked her because she was a photographer, which I thought was a kind of unique take. And I like the idea of being on an island, kind of the isolation. And I thought also that I would be profiling a woman. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. John, please share some of the challenges you faced in collaborating long distance. And before that, I really would love to hear how you decided to talk about your mom in this beautiful and just poignant way. John, are you with us? Okay, so while we wait for John to come back, let's go to Gail. And Gail, could you please just tell us how you first learned about Regina Hoeness, and what inspired you to create this documentary?
So I knew very little about Regina Hoeness, and then I was approached by the head of the American Jewish Archives to co-sponsor a trip in which the 4 first women who were ordained in America would go to Germany to honor the memory and really learn about Regina Hoeness. She was better known in Europe than she was here. And that's part of the story, that she should be known. She was the first woman rabbi, the first woman to be ordained. And not only that, she was ordained in 1935 in Berlin, just as the Nuremberg laws were put into place, and yet she was completely forgotten. So I got that's what we do at the archive. We try to recover these stories that should be known. And in this case, it was taking women for whom this could have been a very important legacy and became a very important legacy, to recover somebody that they saw as their ancestor or foremother. I didn't start out trying to make a film. I actually, I just decided that I wanted to bring a camera person on the trip with us because I wanted documentary footage for the archive. And it was only when I got home and started looking at that footage that I said, there's really a very important story here. And the best way to tell it, since I have the footage, is with a film.
Thank you, Gail. John, let's go back to you, and why don't you share with us the challenges that you faced in collaborating long distance with the other filmmakers, and as I asked before, talk about where you came up or how you decided to come up with talking about your mother in this beautiful and poignant way in the film.
Well, thank you. And I love all of your films. So it's been really fun to get to know all of your work. So thank you for that. Eiko Otake and I have known each other for 40 years. She is a choreographer, movement artist, and she's perhaps best known for working with her husband, Koma. And Eiko and Koma did this very slow, organic Buto movement around the world. But in recent years, she's been doing solo projects. And in 2017, she started something she called the Duets Projects, where she started working with artists in other mediums, not necessarily in dance. So it's musicians, filmmakers, younger artists. And she just, her premise is, what can we do together that I can't do alone? You know, and so we were at a memorial service of a friend of ours in 2018, and Eiko's mother had just passed away. So we were talking a lot about death, and my mom had passed away a few years before. And she said, well, I'll send you the eulogy I did for her memorial service. And she said, and I love your films. She's shown some of them in New York. And she said, I would love to work with you. And I said, well, I can't dance. But when she sent me her eulogy, I then sent her something I'd written about my mother's death. And I said, so I think there's something here that we want to craft this together. And so we kind of edited each other's work. It changed. It was no longer a eulogy. We kind of wanted to talk very intimately to our dead mothers. And Brian Stevenson, who was the production director at Vermont PBS, I had done a commercial with him a few years before for the station. And I loved working with the guy. And I said, okay, Brian, I have this really simple idea, but it has to be very dark, very austere. And we'll shoot in the morning, we'll edit in the afternoon. Are you good with it? He said, sure, come on in. And so the three of us worked long distance, and Eiko came the day before. We practiced because she's not an artist who is used to speaking. So we spent a lot of time honing that, and she edited my script, I edited her script, we edited each other's, and it was just kind of a seamless thing but you know, when you know someone so intimately for so long, it was just a pleasure to work with her.
Thank you. Thank you, John, for that. Let's get back to Gail, where you were in the archives and you learned of Regina and her work. What I love the archives. There's just so many stories and historical, figures there that just really provides a deep context to history. What stood out to you about Regina that you still remember now?
I think what stood out to me was her persistence. In fact, one of the rabbis who came on the trip has since written a children's book called Regina, She Persisted. And the persistence has to do with the fact that people didn't really get the idea of a woman being ordained. They weren't interested in seeing a woman being ordained. The person who was actually her sponsor at the theological school where she would have been ordained died just before the time of her ordination, and the person who took over was not willing to ordain her. She spent another 5 years till she could find someone who would ordain her. And it's just this story of continued persistence to be what she felt she was meant to be. And then to do it at a time in Germany, which was the most horrific time for Jews in Germany. And to not do what many male rabbis did, which was to leave for other countries, but to stay there and persist in doing what she believed she was intended to do, which was to serve her people as a rabbi, and then to continue to do that in Theresienstadt, and to do it really up to the moment that she was deported and murdered in Auschwitz. That's, to me, an unforgettable story.
Thank you, Gail. And I want to just remind everyone who is watching that you can put your questions in the Q&A function, and then we'll ask those questions to the filmmakers here. And with that, I have a question for Brian. The person wants to know, how long did you spend with your subject, and did you storyboard your film? Don't forget to unmute.
My gosh. I spent only a week with her actually, but I had a hustle. It was like sun up to sundown every day. And there's no electricity. So, we'd have dinner basically by candlelight and then go to bed at like 7:30. And then I'd wake up around 4 o'clock and prep for the day. I didn't storyboard because I didn't know what to expect, as making a documentary. So, you just go out, and I followed her around. The biggest challenge for me was I didn't know how to make a film, how I was going to make a film about solitude. That was my biggest challenge when I got home and started editing it. In fact, I thought I didn't have a film and I was going to give up and abandon it. And I said, I just have to honor her and cobble something together, and I'll just throw it up online. I wasn't going to bother with like doing a festival run. It took me 6 months to edit the piece. One, because I'm slow in editing, and just two, I just had to step away from it, come back, step away, and I had just moved to Los Angeles as well. So yeah, I really struggled with how do you tell a story about solitude.
Wow, amazing. And Chloe, you're based in the UK, but you did a film in New England. Please share, what challenges did you have in making this film and working with your character?
I mean, really, there were none. It was like I said before, it was one of the sort of smoothest films I've ever had to make. My husband came out and met me. We worked together. So he met me in New Hampshire and we went to Maine together. So we were working together. And because a lot of, I wanted to make a film that sort of really, for the audience, you know, you really got a sense of all the different kind of actions involved with lobster fishing. And that sort of made these quite minute, mundane, repetitive details almost kind of operatic in the film, almost like sort of really over dramatize them, and kind of make them more epic than they might seem normally. But what was great was that she, you know, she repeated these same actions over and over, and the light changed. So we were able to really to shoot these things many, many times, and almost rehearse them, and then get to the point when the light was beautiful. You know, I'd know which angles were best. And it was because it was an unfunded project. I think that's what's become complicated in my career, is that a lot of the stuff I do now is commissioned, so you have a lot of voices involved. Whereas this was just an unfunded project that I just wanted to do. And therefore, I had a lot of freedom and creative freedom, and the editing process was lovely as well. And, you know, now when I go and shoot in America, I have to get an, you know, special carnet for my equipment, and, you know, special visa and all of this stuff. But back then, you know, I just did it with my camera. I don't know if I had the right permission or anything. We just did it. And
thank you. And Sarah, you just did it and did a nice doc on Melissa Glick. So, what was your editing process like, in your creative process, in bringing her to life for viewers?
It took me a while. The interview was just, I filmed the interview just one day. I followed her doing an open studio, and I did the interview there. And then I was trying to find the most interesting part about her artwork, and also try to find out something about what was behind her story, and why she chose to use recycled material for her art. It took me a while also because, like Brian, I need to sit, edit, and then just step away. That helps me to see the video in a different way. And then I asked some filmmakers friends to take a look at it. So they said to get some advice. And I also involved a friend of mine. I went to Berkeley with him, Saul Guanipa. He's a film composer. And I collaborate with him also to find the right music.
Okay, thank you so much for that. The films, like Chloe said, her film was not funded. What about the rest of y'all? Were your films funded, or was this something that just came from the heart and your pocketbook? We'll start with Brian.
Sure. I funded it myself, which is the case with all my work. This is a piece of part of a series of films I've been working on for several years about people who have kind of off the grid jobs and have live a life of solitude. And I'm very interested in people's relationships with the environment that they live and or work in. And what I noticed as I was doing these films, it wasn't intended to be this way, this series of films, is they were each took place in a season. And Winter's Watch was the last one. I didn't have anything for the winter. I had my spring, summer, fall. And so, you know, this was kind of completed the series. Like my summer was about a fire lookout in Montana. And the spring one was about a young couple who owned a mercantile in Montana. And then I did one about a trail angel along the Appalachian Trail in North Carolina for my fall. I did that in November several years ago. So yeah, I fund all these by myself. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you. And Gail?
So the film was made on a very small budget, and as director of the Jewish Women's Archive, I was quite used to having to fundraise. So comparatively speaking, this felt like it was almost a funded project because it just was relatively little money to raise.
And John?
Well, some of my films have gotten major funding. This one got turned down. So I tried to get some funding for this, and I don't know, it just didn't work out. And Ego said, well, let's just do it anyway. I'll come up to Vermont. And it was great. I, talked to Vermont PBS, and, we had so distilled it down that we knew that we were going to have not a lot of time. And even in the process of developing the film, we thought we were going to do some gestures and some rituals as well. And then we realized that's just going to be a distraction. We actually want just to talk to our dead mothers. And we didn't need any of the other stuff. So it was pretty easy to go in with a teleprompter, and we each, Brian had set up the lighting and we liked it. We walked into it, we tested it. We each, in 2 hours, we had shot it and went to lunch, and 4 hours later, we had edited it, and we did it seamlessly, all three of us together, edited it. And it was like, there was no ego. It was like, we had all like, okay, how do we make this exactly how we want? And everyone added different ideas. And it was just, by 8 o'clock that night, we were done.
Nice. And we actually have a comment from a viewer who said they loved Elegies. What a touching and special film. I related a lot to the relationship the woman had with her mother. Thank you to John Kolake for sharing his beautiful thoughts. And thank you to all the other filmmakers and all involved in bringing this production to Vermont PBS. So, lots of love to John for Elegies and the rest of the filmmakers. But there's one thing I'd like to ask Brian and Chloe and even Sarah about the production process. You're telling the story of someone's life. Did the actual filming get in the way of that, and how did you have to navigate that? So, because once you put a camera in front of someone, it definitely changes the story. It changes the person's response to the film. So, what was your process, or how did you manage that? Who'd like to go first? Let's try Chloe.
I think for my film, I was filming Colleen just doing her job, and when you're out on the water, and particularly with lobster fishing, it's quite quick work, and the boat's moving, and then you arrive at your lobster cages, and you've got to pull them up, and then they have to measure all the lobsters, and any that are pregnant they have to throw back in. They've got to comply with lots of rules. So everything was quite quick, and she was very much concentrating on her work. So and because we were filming her doing it over and over and over again, she sort of forgot about us. And actually I don't think really we did get in the way in that instance. In other films, I see people's behavior change a lot around the camera. But in this case there was no sort of dialogue, so we weren't interested in filming the conversations that she was having with her partner, who was the captain on the boat. It was more about filming the movements, almost like it was a dance. So we didn't. There wasn't any of that really. And then the next day, I did the interview at her house, just the audio. And again, I sometimes find doing interviews where it's just the audio allows people to relax because they don't have a camera in their face, so they do relax into what they're saying and they can think about it a bit more. So it all felt very natural and kind of authentic.
Thank you. Brian?
Yeah, I'll piggyback off on that. I only did an audio interview with Alexandra too, and I agree wholeheartedly with what Chloe had said. And part of that was because too, Alexandra it was the hardest interview I've ever done. She's a very shy individual. And as she says in the film, being a winter caretaker, she needs this in her life, this time on this island. every winter. This is like in order to live. And that is a theme that I noticed in this entire anthology that I have been working on. All these people kind of need this solitude or break from the everyday in their lives. So I think having the camera would have been a lot more intimidating. I know it would be for myself. And so I did the interview with her over a course of 3 days, and I want to say it was a total of almost 8 hours. You know, it was a lot, and I really had to work on getting information from her, because again, it's really hard to the job of winter caretaker. There's not that many duties. You're just there to make sure nothing goes wrong, like, you know, it's a lot of just checking the buildings, that kind of stuff. And again, it was that challenge of, sorry, that challenge of how do you make a film out of, about solitude? And the film, for me, and this is a lot of my films, it's about pacing. My work is about the pacing. And that's what I really worked on. You'll notice it's all static shots. And I like to do long takes and have the camera just linger on the image, you know. So yes, I worked really hard on the pacing. And that's what I always say about the film, is it's a film about pacing more than anything.
Thank you, Brian. And we love the cattail. Sarah, there was a moment when Melissa was sharing her story, where she talked about where she thought maybe she could have become an engineer, but it was the 1970s, and that just wasn't possible for her. I thought that was a very poignant moment that you caught on camera. Did you have experience with capturing other types of moments like that with your character?
I usually try to find the most interesting part, and I think because it's a story about a woman, I think it was a really important part. I usually spend time off camera before interviewing my subject. So with her, it was really natural. The process was, she's really friendly, so it wasn't really difficult. And also, I usually come up with a list of questions that then I pass to my collaborator, because I like to concentrate on the moving camera. I really trust her, and she's really good. So that's basically my process, and I always try to find the most interesting parts of the subject.
Thank you, Sarah. Gail, in your documentary, there were women rabbis who were there, I guess, discussing things in Germany. Did you experience any moments there while they were experiencing Regina and her life that sort of like stood out to you and really helped inform you about how you would tell her story?
Yes, for sure. And in many ways, I think the film is really not Regina's story. It's the story of these women rabbis discovering their foremother and what it meant to them to find her, so to speak. Some of the moments that really stood out for me, and I felt like I had to get them into the film, were, though they weren't the most interesting from a visual point of view, but the moment in the archive, actually, in Berlin, where they are looking at her writing and they see the document in which somebody signs that she is ordained as a rabbi, just was so powerful for them that even though visually, when I looked at it, I said, this isn't really that interesting, I couldn't leave it out. So it was, you know, that was a choice I made in terms of the editing, but it was a choice I made because it was such a significant moment for them. And actually the same thing, and maybe that's why I made that choice. The same thing happened when we were in Theresienstadt, and there in the archive, there are these posters that have the talks that she was giving to the people that were interned at Theresienstadt. And many of the subjects were the same subjects that these rabbis, of their talks here. And unfortunately, our camera person was getting ready for the ceremony at that point. So he wasn't there to film that. And I was really sorry because it was a very memorable moment and we couldn't have it in the film. So.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So now this question is for everyone, and we'll start with John. Could you share what you're currently working on and where might we see it?
Well, I'm not working on a film right now because I am in the state legislature, and on August 25th, we go back and we're facing a $200 million drop in revenues in our state. And so I have to put together with my colleagues a balanced budget in the next 3 weeks. And then I'm also adapting my online teaching with you, Dora, at Champlain. I teach grant writing. So that's pretty much what my summer has been doing. That one thing I'd like to say, though, is that seeing all the work, especially the work about isolation, was interesting to me because during our period of COVID, it means something very different, and resiliency means something very different. And for our little piece, we shot it last November. Suddenly, it was really just a very myopic piece about our mothers, and suddenly during COVID, when people couldn't say goodbye to their mothers, it meant a whole different thing. And then we had a screening in Minneapolis the week George Floyd was murdered by the police. And his last words, he cried out for his mother. So it's so interesting to me that in all of your work tonight, I'm reading it through the present day lens. You made it some of them years ago, but it's how our audiences define the meaning in this work, even with the intention that we all have as makers. It's only half baked that way. It's really the times and people. So I just love this conversation, and I love that PBS is doing this, and you will see what your viewers think as well.
Thank you, John. And let me go to Brian on that is solitude. That is something that you said that you focused on. And I am really curious as to how that resonates with you. And then after that question, you can talk about what you're currently working on.
Yeah, I love being by myself when I can. I love going hiking and camping. And that's how I discovered the idea about the fire lookout. I was on a backpacking trip in Glacier National Park, and I tend to do things that I feel like interest me, and it stays with me for several days. Like a lot of people would say, oh, you should do a doc on this, or you should do a doc on that. And I'm like, that's a great idea, but I don't think I'm the right person. It has to speak to me. And these are stories that spoke to me. And what I love about making these films is I get to kind of experience what my subjects are experiences for a very brief amount of time. So I love that. And I wanted to kind of I thought John's observation was amazing, because my last film, Departing Gesture, was about a funeral director in Mississippi who cremates or buries the bodies of primarily men who die of HIV/AIDS, and the families or next of kin don't want to claim those bodies, so he takes it upon himself to give them a proper burial. And it kind of like in this time of COVID, as he was saying, like there's people who couldn't say goodbye to their family. And I, that's kind of in a way what Departing Gesture was about, or in this case, families who refused or didn't want to, they disowned these family members. What I'm working on next, well, I was supposed to March 13th go down to Florida. I'm from Massachusetts. My parents recently, about 4 or 5 years ago, relocated to Sarasota, Florida. My mom had a stroke on Valentine's Day 2019, and it's a very interesting story. She was ironically leaving the doctor's office when she had the stroke, and she was driving, and she got into, I think, 3 hit and runs. Nobody was hurt, and she was driving around town, and she only remembers bits and pieces of this, but it's about this experience of having the stroke and like what guided her through this experience. Yeah, so I'm hoping to go down at some point to start filming it.
Thank you. Sarah, what about you?
I have 2 projects in mind. One is more personal. It's about my grandma that passed away in November. And I have a deep appreciation for my grandparents in general. So I start filming them. And it's kind of difficult because it's more personal work. So it's going to take me some time, but I'm in the process of working on that. And then I'm actually working on a documentary about an Armenian Lebanese vocalist that takes her voice around the world to connect communities and help healing intergenerational trauma and fighting the aftermaths of the war through the therapeutic power of arts. And I'm actually in the post-production. I was supposed to film during the summer. COVID happened, so now readjust everything, moving all the parts around.
Thank you, Sarah. And Chloe?
I'm working on a few different projects, but primarily I'm in post-production on a documentary called Canary about 2 women with electromagnetic sensitivity, which means they're allergic to Wi-Fi, mobile phones, radiation. And that will be streaming on topic.com hopefully soon. See how many changes I get back on the next cut.
Thank you. And Gail?
So as is probably evident, I am not a filmmaker. I loved working on the 2 films that I worked on. But my next project, which is in some ways related, is a writing project and a memoir project after all the work I did in the archive, but then ending with the film on Regina Hoeness. I felt that it's time to look at the story of my past and particularly of my parents who both survived concentration camps and the Holocaust, and to write that story.
Wonderful. I look forward to seeing all of your next films. And John, sorry, but you need to get that budget done. But thank you for joining us for Women's Stories, a short film showcase. We appreciated all of your questions, and thank you as well to our amazing filmmakers joining us from California to the UK and from right here in New England. These films are part of our Made Here series, which airs every Thursday on Vermont PBS, and they are archived at vermontpbs.org/madehere. Vermont PBS is thankful to be able to share commercial-free documentaries like these, thanks to our supporting members. To learn more about membership, please visit vermontpbs.org/donate. Thank you so much for joining us again, and please stay safe, everyone, and have a good night.
Thank you.